There's a saying that your wedding day is the happiest day of your life. I'd heard it so many times, rolled my eyes and thought, sure, as if happiness can be constrained to just one day. But standing there in my intricately beaded gown, the train flowing behind me like a rippling stream, and gazing into Jack's eyes, I found myself eating my own skeptical words. For a moment, everything was perfect. The universe had conspired to wrap us in a bubble where nothing could go wrong. Jack looked dashing in his tailored tuxedo, his dark hair neatly styled, and the kind of smile on his face that made me fall in love with him all over again. The crowd seemed to blur into the background. It was just me and him, standing before each other and making promises that felt eternal. Do you, Lena? Take Jack to be your lawfully wedded husband. The minister's voice reverberated in the hall, which was lavishly decorated with flowers, twinkling fairy lights, and white drapes. I do, I replied, trying to suppress the wobble in my voice. And do you, Jack, take Lena to be your lawfully wedded wife? I absolutely do, Jack said, emphasizing the absolutely. And everyone chuckled. I felt invincible as we shared our first kiss as a married couple. The crowd erupted into cheers, and as we walked down the aisle, hand in hand, rice showering over us like tiny blessings, I thought, yes, this is my happily ever after. The reception was just as magical. The banquet hall was filled with our friends and family, who were genuinely happy for us. Jack and I had our first dance to At Last by Ada James, and it felt like we were the only two people in the room. We were in our own little world, spinning slowly while lost in each other's eyes. But it wasn't just about me and Jack. His parents, Susan and Bill, were incredible from day one. They welcomed me into their family with open arms, treating me not as a daughter-in-law, but as a daughter they never had. Lena, you've made our Jack so happy, Susan said, pulling me into a warm hug during the reception. We're so thrilled to have you as part of the family. Thank you, Susan. You and Bill have been so wonderful to me, I responded, feeling grateful beyond words. Bill chimed in. Well, when you know, you know. And we knew you were the perfect fit for our family the moment we met you. For a while, it was as if everything had aligned just right. Jack and I were madly in love, and his family adored me as much as I adored them. The night ended with us leaving in a classic car, just married scrawled in beautiful cursive on a sign hanging off the back bumper. As we drove away, cans clattering behind us, it was as if we were sailing into the great, promising unknown, armed with love and love, and blessed by family. And so, there it was, the picture, perfect beginning to a life that promised eternal love and unwavering support. Little did I know, it was just the calm before a storm I had never foreseen, a storm that would make me question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. But that, dear readers, is a tale for another chapter. Life has a way of blindsiding you, just when you think you've got it all mapped out. We were a few years into our marriage, still deeply in love, still sharing that sense of invincibility that had enveloped us on our wedding day. We had settled into a cozy home, our nest decorated with mementos of our life together, photos from our travels, trinkets that had caught our eye during mundane grocery store trips, and wall art that we both had bickered playfully over before settling on a choice. It was a Wednesday evening. Not that the day matters, but somehow the ordinariness of it all still haunts me. I was in the kitchen, prepping a simple dinner, chicken Alfredo, Jack's favorite, when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it!" Jack shouted from the living room, where he was probably engrossed in some documentary. The sound of the door opening and an exchange of muffled greetings made me curious, but I continued stirring the creamy sauce on the stove, thinking it might be a package delivery or a neighbor dropping by. When Jack walked back into the kitchen, His face was as pale as a blank canvas, and he was flanked by his parents, Susan and Bill. My stomach plummeted at the sight of their grim expressions. They usually dropped by with smiles and an air of casualness, sometimes even unannounced, but this was different. Their somber faces were the prologue to news that I knew would shatter the peace of our life. "We need to talk, all of us," Jack said, his voice choked. I turned off the stove, and we moved to the living room, sitting down with a collective sense of dread hanging in the air. Bill cleared his throat, his eyes moist. "We've just come back from the doctor's office. I have been diagnosed with cancer." For a moment, the room was suspended in a dreadful silence. Each word hung heavy, pulling us all down into a reality we didn't want to accept. My heart was pounding, a loud drumbeat in the quiet room. "Wah, what stage is it? What did the doctor say about treatment options?" Jack stammered, the words barely escaping his trembling lips. Susan chimed in, her voice a soft whisper. "It's advanced stage IV. They're talking about chemo and other treatments, but it's going to be a difficult fight. Is there any hope?" I dared to ask, already knowing that the answer wouldn't be reassuring. Bill looked at me, then at his son and wife. "Hope is all we have." Jack looked devastated, like he'd been hit by a wrecking ball, taking down the facade of strength he'd always upheld. He was Daddy's boy, the apple of Bill's eye, and the news was crumbling him to pieces. "Okay, we fight this," Jack finally said, pulling himself together. "We'll do everything we can. Dad, you're not going through this alone." "I never thought I would be," Bill replied, locking eyes with me for a moment longer than usual. He knew I would stand by him, and so did I. We spent the rest of the evening discussing medical jargon, treatments, chemotherapy, side effects, oncologists, and an endless list of terms that seemed alien to our previous conversations about vacations, movies, or dinner plans. It was as if a storm had made landfall on our idyllic life, and we're scrambling to put up the shutters, knowing well that some things would be irrevocably damaged. That night, as Jack and I lay in bed, the weight of the news pressed down on us like a dark cloud. We held each other, but the comforting warmth we usually found in our embrace was replaced by a chilling sense of uncertainty. The puzzle of our perfect life had been disrupted. A piece had been removed, leaving a gaping hole that we didn't know how to fill. And so began a chapter of our life, written in medical prescriptions and hospital bills, of unwelcome news and painful goodbyes. Little did I know then that the person I thought would be my rock would turn into a shifting sand, unreliable and harsh, eroding away the trust and love that I thought was unbreakable. But that revelation was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to unfold. As we dove headfirst into the war against cancer, our lives became a revolving door of hospital visits, consultations, and treatments. Bill had to undergo a harsh regimen of chemotherapy, coupled with targeted therapy, and even a trial drug that was supposed to be a game changer. In the initial months, optimism flickered, teetering on the edge of uncertainty, but it was there. I would often sit by Bill's bedside, holding his frail hand, whispering words of encouragement as the chemo drugs flowed into his veins. "How are you holding up, Dad?" I would ask, trying to offer some semblance of comfort. "It's not a walk in the park, but I'm getting by," Bill would reply, his eyes tired but smiling. "Thanks to you, Lena. You've been my rock through all of this." During those days, I felt my resolve hardening. I wanted to be there for Bill in every way possible, not just because he was my father-in-law, but because he had always been there for me when I needed someone. We had a relationship that transcended labels. He was my family in the truest sense. It broke my heart to see him suffer, to see his robust frame whittle away to skin and bones, to see his formerly bright eyes dulled by the merciless grip of disease. As weeks turned into months, Jack and Susan started to change. I first noticed it when we were gathered in the doctor's office for an update. The oncologist, Dr. Harris, delivered the grim news. The treatments were not working as well as we'd hoped. I recommend we continue with the current line of treatment for another 2 months, Dr. Harris suggested. If we don't see a significant improvement, we may need to discuss other options. Jack immediately countered, other options like what? Hospice care? Stopping treatment altogether? Susan seemed to nod, as if affirming this grim trajectory. Perhaps we should start considering quality of life. These treatments are very aggressive. I was shocked. Were they really considering giving up the fight? Bill was still there, still willing to battle through the hardships, yet they seemed ready to throw in the towel. But there's still a chance, right? I spoke up, incredulous. There's still hope. Dr. Harris looked at me, his eyes sympathetic. There's always hope, but we must balance it against the physical and emotional toll the treatments are taking. That was all I needed to hear. Then we keep fighting. As long as Bill is willing to fight, we fight with him. But my determination didn't resonate with Jack and Susan. In the following weeks, their visits to the hospital became infrequent. Whenever I broached the subject, Jack would curtly reply, "I can't watch him suffer anymore. It's better this way." Better for whom? I couldn't help but retort one day, my frustration reaching a boiling point. "You're giving up on him, Jack. We vowed to stand by each other in sickness and health, for better or worse. This is one of those worst times, and you're just walking away." Jack shot back, his eyes cold and distant. "I can't put myself through this, Lena. You can't expect me to." His words struck me like a slap across the face. How could the man I loved, the man who promised to be my rock, turn away from his own father in his most vulnerable time? And more than that, how could Susan, his devoted wife of over 30 years, do the same? Their absence was felt deeply by Bill. The hurt in his eyes became increasingly evident with every visit that he expected but never came. And yet we never spoke about it. He knew, and I knew, and the silent understanding between us was more powerful than any words could ever be. As I continued to support Bill through his treatment, the divide between me and my husband, between me and my mother-in-law, grew wider, and Bill and I, pushed together by the gravity of his condition and the weight of their absence, grew closer than ever. It was a connection forged in the crucible of struggle, a testament to the strength of our love and commitment, and it was this very bond that would light the way through the dark chapters yet to come. After 3 grueling years, the unthinkable happened. Bill's cancer went into remission. We couldn't believe it at first. We were sitting in Dr. Harris's office, bracing ourselves for another update, another round of treatments, or perhaps a new clinical trial. But this time, it was different. "I have good news," Dr. Harris began, looking up from a file he had been carefully examining. "The latest scans show that the cancer has significantly shrunk. You're not out of the woods yet, but we can consider this remission." The weight of those words was overwhelming. I looked over at Bill, his eyes filled with tears of joy and disbelief. He turned to me and said, "I couldn't have done it without you, Lena." "We did it, Dad," I replied, my own eyes moistening. "We fought it together, every step of the way." It felt like a miracle. All those long nights at the hospital, the painful treatments, the endless worry, it had led us to this remarkable turning point. Bill was getting better, and it felt like we had conquered the world. Yet, in this moment of triumph, the absence of Jack and Susan loomed larger than ever. "You should call them. Let them know the good news," I urged Bill. He hesitated, a sense of sorrow washing over him. "I don't think they'll care, Lena. They gave up on me a long time ago." The bitterness in his voice was well earned. They had abandoned him when he needed them the most. How could a son and his mother, people who are supposed to stand by you through thick and thin, turn their backs so heartlessly? A week later, on the day of Bill's discharge from the hospital, it was just me who showed up. The room felt oddly empty as he packed his belongings. No balloons, no congratulations cards, no joyful family members taking pictures to commemorate this miraculous day. Just the two of us, bound by the struggle we had faced together. "Are you ready?" I asked, holding up his coat for him. "I've been ready for this day for a long time," he responded, a hint of melancholy coloring his words. "But it's bittersweet." I understood what he meant. This should have been a day of complete happiness, yet it was marred by the stark reality of his own son and wife not being there for him. It was a hollow victory. As we left the hospital, he suddenly said, "Lena, you've been my rock. You've stood by me when my own flesh and blood wouldn't. How can I ever repay you?" "You don't have to repay me, Dad. I did it because I love you. Family supports each other. That's what we do." He looked at me deeply, his eyes twinkling like they used to before the cancer darkened our lives. Family supports each other. Yes, and it's high time we did something about those who don't understand that. I was taken aback. Bill had always been a peaceful man, never one to hold grudges, but I could sense a change in him, a newfound vigor fueled by the trials he had overcome and the loneliness he had endured. As we sat in the car, driving away from the place that had been both a battlefield and a sanctuary for us, Bill took out a pen and a few sheets of paper from his bag. "Thank you for everything, Lena," he said, handing them over to me. "Let's get back at them." I unfolded the papers and immediately recognized what they were. Divorce papers. A shiver ran down my spine. It was a drastic step, one that would turn our world upside down. But then I looked over at Bill and I knew I wasn't alone. We had stood together through one of life's toughest battles, and now we would stand together to reclaim the lives we deserved. My heart pounded as I gripped the pen. This was it, the point of no return. But sometimes in life, you reach a crossroads where turning back is no longer an option. This was our turning point. And so, with a heavy heart but a resolute spirit, I signed the papers. It was the end of an era, but it was also a new beginning. The people we had once counted on had failed us, but in their absence, we had discovered an unwavering support in each other. And now, it was time for us to move forward, to turn the page and start a new chapter. One where we would stand up against those who had wronged us and find the happiness we had been denied. The divorce papers sat on my kitchen table for days, like ticking time bombs waiting to detonate. The mere sight of them filled me with a mix of dread and relief. It was an emotionally agonizing decision, but deep down, I knew it was the right one. Finally, one evening, Jack came home from work, looking as detached as ever. I knew it was time to confront the elephant in the room. "Jack, we need to talk," I said, leading him to the table where the papers lay. "What's this?" he asked, glancing at the documents before looking back at me. "Divorce papers," I responded, my voice steady despite the trembling of my hands. Jack's eyes widened, but he didn't seem completely surprised. "Is this because I didn't visit Dad?" "It's not just about that, although that was the last straw," I explained. "It's about our relationship, our lack of support for each other, our different values, and your unwillingness to stand by your own family in times of need. If you can't be there for your own father, how can I expect you to be there for your own father? How can I expect you to be there for me, or any future children we might have?" He sighed, took a seat, and began to read through the papers. After a long silence, he said, "So this is it then?" "Yes," I replied, "unless you think there's something left worth fighting for." He paused, then shook his head. "I don't know, Lena. Maybe you're right. Maybe we are too different." That was it. No begging, no pleading, no passionate argument to save our marriage. It confirmed that I had made the right decision. I watched as he picked up a pen and signed the papers. Meanwhile, Bill had a confrontation of his own. Armed with his set of divorce papers, he confronted Susan, Their conversation was equally as terse, their marriage dissolving in the cold formality of legal documents. Susan barely put up a fight, and Bill couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation as he signed his name on the dotted line. "Guess we're both free now," Bill said when we met up later. "Funny how life works out sometimes." "It is," I agreed. "And now it's time for us to truly live, and to make sure they regret taking us for granted," Bill added, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "That's when we hatched our plan. It was not vengeance in the violent or malicious sense. It was about living our best lives and showing Jack and Susan what they had lost, what they had willingly given up. We would succeed, thrive, and find happiness without them." Over the next few months, Bill and I became each other's support system. He threw himself into various charity works and even started a foundation to help other cancer patients. I focused on my career, and with the newfound time and emotional energy, quickly moved up the ranks. We attended social events, met new people, and slowly but surely started rewriting our life stories without the characters who had brought us so much pain. Every success we achieved, every milestone we crossed, was a slap in the face to those who had doubted and abandoned us, and the universe, in its own way, seemed to be rooting for us. Then came the cherry on top. I met someone, David, who was everything Jack was not: compassionate, supportive, and genuinely loving. Bill met someone too, a widow named Emily, who had gone through her own set of trials and tribulations. They clicked instantly, and for the first time in years, we felt truly loved and appreciated. As we sat together at a cafe, savoring our coffees and the sweetness of our newfound lives, Bill looked at me and said, "You know, Lena, the best revenge is living well." "You're absolutely right, Dad," I replied, smiling from ear to ear, and we're doing just that. We raised our cups in a toast to us, to new beginnings, and to the poetic justice of life that sometimes, when you least expect it, gives you the chance to turn the tables. Letting go of the past and embracing the future never felt so gratifying. We had won, not by bringing others down, but by lifting ourselves up. And as we looked ahead to the unfolding chapters of our lives, we couldn't help but feel that the best was yet to come. As the years rolled by, Bill and I found ourselves reveling in the new lives we had built. Our paths had diverged from those we once considered family, but our successes, both personal and professional, spoke volumes. Bill's foundation for cancer patients was making headlines for its groundbreaking work, and my career was soaring higher than I had ever imagined. Then, the universe decided to give us one last nudge. A family gathering was announced, a big event that would bring together relatives from near and far. Both Bill and I were hesitant to go, but after some thought, we agreed that this could be our final act of closure. Walking into the venue, the tension was palpable. The room filled with idle chatter, feigned smiles, and warm embraces, but the moment we made our entrance, it was as if the air grew thick. There was Jack standing near the bar, a cocktail in his hand, and there was Susan, seated, engaged in conversation with some distant cousins. Their eyes met ours, and for a split second, the weight of our past hung heavily between us. Jack approached first. "Lena, you look well," he said, a veiled note of surprise in his voice. "Thank you, Jack." "So do you," I responded, cordially but distantly. "How's life?" he ventured. "Life is good, really good," I replied. "I've been promoted, and I'm in a loving relationship now. And you?" "Oh, you know, same old," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, congrats on." "Thank you," I said before turning my attention to Bill, who had just finished a rather icy conversation with Susan. "How'd it go?" I asked. "As expected," he replied. "Cold and meaningless. She did make it a point to mention that she's traveling a lot these days, seeing the world." "Does she know about the foundation?" I inquired. "Oh, she knows," he said, his lips curling into a small smile. It's all over the news. Hard to miss, really. Our conversation was interrupted by the announcement for everyone to gather for a toast. As we held up our glasses, the room filled with the clinking of crystal and the empty words of familial love and togetherness. But for Bill and me, the moment was bittersweet, a harsh reminder of what family could have been and what it ultimately was not. As the gathering winded down, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This chapter of our lives, fraught with pain and betrayal, was coming to an end. Bill seemed to sense my thoughts and took my hand. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Yes," I said, glancing back at the room full of people who had been our world, but were now merely figures in a past life. As we stepped out into the crisp night air, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom, as though a weight had been lifted. For the first time, the family gathering felt more like a farewell. A bitter end, indeed, but also a fresh start. "You okay?" Bill asked as we got into the car. "I am," I said, pausing to collect my thoughts. "It's strange. Even though they're the ones who turned their backs on us, I can't help but feel like we're the ones who truly moved on, and they're still stuck in their miserable little worlds." "That's because we chose to live, Lena," Bill said, starting the engine. "We chose to make the most of the hand we were dealt, instead of folding and walking away." As we drove off, leaving behind the memories and the people who had failed us, I felt a sense of peace settle in. Life had given us lemons, and not only had we made lemonade, but we had also turned it into a thriving lemonade stand. We had come full circle, from the depths of despair to the heights of happiness, and though the journey was marked by betrayal and heartbreak, it was also defined by resilience, courage, and an unbreakable bond between two souls.